to achieve this outcome, but the risks were not justified. John is reasonable, and yet before killing asks Leo if this man can still be saved, but his face makes it clear that the only salvation for this guy will be death. Everything turned out to be true. No one will help him, only to wander in the boat of the guide of the eternal guide of souls to the underworld. No matter how difficult it is to make such a decision, John should make it in cold blood, since it is no longer possible to help the man, which means it is better to deprive him of his suffering. John grabs him even tighter, squeezing his throat tighter and tighter. Only he can decide death or life in a mindless body. Tim is worried about his subordinate and does not want to let some John kill him, under no circumstances. Tim is already starting to yell at him in an attempt to stop him, but everyone understands that there is no way to save him. The shaved man is very excited because it is never, as if his body is hanging in John's hands, that he can even take a breath of air. The second shouts the name of the virus victim. He cannot believe in all this, that his friend will go to another world at the hands of the enemy. Tim even remembered the promises. He himself never kept them, but as it relates to him, the promise is most valuable. John does not listen to this fool, since he is the only one to blame for all this. Only his guilt lies in his death, and the infection of all people also lies on Tim's shoulders. He still continues to pray that John stop the torture, so that he does not kill his comrade and friend, whom he would easily send to be eaten by the dead just to save himself. Still, John did not listen to him, and his life was over with this. Blood splashed in all directions, and the end of the man's life. These are Tim's sincere emotions. Finally, he can show compassion for his people. Something human has awakened in him. Even a tear rolled down his cheeks. His eyes became very wet. He is still a freak, but John's words awakened something humane in him. Tim bowed his head, all because of one subordinate, but one could never expect such a reaction from him, since he was not even so worried about his beloved. Clint stands in front of the whole gang with his arms crossed, as if what he was trying to achieve has happened. He has emerged victorious in this battle. Tim is in complete despair. For him, this defeat will become an eternal lesson. He is unlikely to risk his allies, comrades, and subordinates anymore, but as long as he has enough. Meg and Alice could not expect this from John. He was cruel, but he made sure that he did not suffer, so that he did not go wild and start attacking the healthy. Since one was sick, death for everyone else. A killer and a savior, 2 in 1, John is like an executioner. With a swing of his axe, he sacrifices one, saving the majority. The world is still not without losses. Regret and compassion are visible in his eyes, but his hands are already stained with blood and cannot be washed off. But still, he is not guilty of anything. All the blame lies on Tim's shoulders. John remembers the meat and asks Michael about its readiness, and he replies that it is ready. John is generous. Even after the murder, he is calm. He is ready to share his spoils with fools who only have on their minds how to eat and listen to their boss, who is putting their lives on the line. Clint was instantly indignant at how they were going to share the meat when it had been so hard to get it, when they were basking in the cave in complete safety. John thinks strategically. He understands that one mutated person can lead to a tragedy. If they don't help, death is here for everyone, and even significant people can be at risk. Our hero explains everything clearly to Clint, but in his eyes there is a kind of self-interest that never happened before. Something was definitely wrong. He clenched his fist tightly, gathering all his fingers into a fist. Is it all because of John's decision? Is everything to our Clint's liking? Here is Clint's evil look. Everything was red in it. His intentions are not clear, but he doesn't like the fact that John makes such decisions. He put a mask on himself. Everything is clear with him. He most likely wants to throw this whole burden of responsibility far away. Everything in the cave is a burden for him. He only needs John. Clint wants to leave a difficult conversation and says that he will go eat sour berries while his people eat his meat. This nervousness is visible in Clint's movements. Sam tries to slow Clint down so that he eats more slowly, but his anger cannot allow anyone to hear. John perhaps understands what is happening to Clint. He silently looks at him, because he wants to understand what is happening to him. But still his gaze is interrupted, and he throws it towards the people whom he saved with his generosity. Finally, they were able to escape, and it was all because of John, who showed mercy, solved Tim's problem, and generally saved many lives. From John's appearance, one can understand that everything is not as good as everyone thinks. He noticed that strange reaction in Clint. Sincere joy for the survivors was not visible in his eyes. He wanted them all to die. Alice wants to reassure John, thinking that for the near future all problems are solved. John soberly assesses that it is not for nothing that there is a downcast expression on his face. He refused Alice and her decision, since the decision was only to delay the inevitable. John's gaze examined everyone in the cave, who eats, how they look, and most importantly, who wants to throw all their people into the abyss. Clint nervously eats the berries that he and John and the whole gang picked after the hunt. Tim and the whole gang eagerly listen to the delicious aroma of meat and perhaps are waiting for it to be shared with them. The rest of the people eat piece by piece, and to survive they only need ordinary meat, which in their time is considered more valuable than all treasures. John understands how harsh the reality is, and also understands that this decision is only a way to postpone the inevitable, only to leave everything as it is, postponing it. Sam looks at all this from a different angle. He believes that everything is fine since all people have gotten better, but the worst thing lies not in their illness, but in the one who wants to leave them. People rejoice, they feel better. All those who ate zombies have become normal. Their powers are returning. Finally, a small salvation has been found for them. Clint's berry falls to the floor. Is he happy about all this, or is it just a pretense on his part that can be seen? Sam didn't even notice this in him. He didn't consider Clint like that. He didn't understand that Clint didn't care about their lives. It was hard for him to lead them. He would definitely get rid of them all soon. He greedily licks his lips and fingers from the juice, like a bloodthirsty predator swallowing the blood of his prey. Sam is frightened by Clint's reaction. He realizes that he could be next after, in his opinion, useless people. Clint doesn't want to take care of people. He wants to live a quiet life, not get food for people who won't even thank him, who can't give him anything. It can't be. Another patient showed up. Again, the symptoms of someone who ate zombies, again problems. New patients began to appear among Tim's gang, as if one was already on the verge. Tim would again have to beg for help from John and the others. One of the gang is trying to wake up his comrade, but it is already clear that only the Almighty can help him. In the eyes of the six, the hope that that man could still be saved had already disappeared. His eyes became small beads. Here it is. He has almost mutated. His skin has begun to darken. The virus is taking its toll. Now he doesn't have long to live. Tim understands the seriousness of the situation. He urgently needs to make a decision that should solve this problem in the shortest possible time. Tim's people are in despair. They all think that soon they will all become dead or die before everyone's eyes. Tim is very scared. He is confused. When he risked their lives, he could not think that he would be so brazenly forced to sit on his knees with his bags tied in a knot. He casts his gaze towards those from whom he can ask for help, and he will again have to disgrace himself in front of them. Incredibly, Tim decided to turn to Jonah, to his old enemy, to the one whom he had despised all his life, this desire to solve all his mistakes. John remained silent because he did not expect such determination from Tim, or rather, he could not at all expect that he would understand his mistakes and try to solve them. He tries to make a deal again, only this time with John, since it was not possible to find a common language with Clint. Now he has come running to John. Tim offers in return for the meat whatever John asks for, whatever John would want from him. Again, this loudmouth interjects in the middle of the conversation. Again, he is itching. He doesn't seem to solve anything, but points out that John has no right to share meat with Tim. He believes that their people have not eaten at all, and they need to share with Tim's gang, who did not consider them valuable, but now wanted to atone for their sins. He accuses Tim of forcing them to eat zombies. It's all his fault, but they themselves happily stuff their cheeks piece by piece. Tim is also furious. He is not happy to hear this, but he is also guilty, and even more guilty than anyone else for everything he has done. To the side, you can hear the cries of those people that the whole gang should die, every single one, and Tim continues to talk about the deal. Now he began to speak not with requests, but with threats, that it would be better for John to give meat to people, for the sake of their lives. Earlier, John was told that Tim is the son of the ruler of City B, and it would be better for him to give some meat, otherwise they will not get into the city, even through battle. John nevertheless started a dialogue. Now Tim definitely won't have the words to continue the conversation. He stood in front of him so that he would not look down on him, in order to be taller than him and put pressure on him with his charisma. Tim fell silent, yet he was overwhelmed by his strength of spirit. He had no choice but to silently listen to everything that John told him. John points Tim to the reality that if his people don't eat enough, they won't live to see tomorrow morning. All that will be left of them is their horns and legs. Will people care about City B if they don't know whether they will die, whether they will eat today, whether they will live to see tomorrow? John says that there is no need to remember this. Their priority is that they and their families live until tomorrow so that their bellies remain full and do not need food. John leaves Tim without taking his eyes off him, showing him his strength and capabilities. Tim silently looks at John's back, since nothing he says will matter. Is John going to negotiate with his captain so that they share the meat with them? Will he really show mercy even for him? Tim continues to look after John, thinking that he will give them some of the rarest medicine, meat that will save the lives of many in the whole gang. Shaved is very worried about his elder, because last time everything went badly, and he cannot guarantee that everything will go well this time. Tim peers at him and understands the reason for his worries, since he himself is in this situation, and he once easily controlled them. John, for an unknown reason, asks Clint for his dagger, but Clint assumed that John needed it in order to kill the impudent Tim, who had the courage to even threaten him. John orders them to prepare for the fact that after everyone has eaten, he will wait for them in the car, since they will soon be moving out. People agree with their leader, and even the majority have already reinforced themselves. However, almost everyone is ready to move forward. John decided to continue the conversation with Tim, and it was not without reason that he asked Clint for a knife. Something crept into his head, but he definitely does not intend to kill him, since he made a promise, and he keeps them. Tim tensed up a lot. He was frightened by John's strange decisions, why he needed the dagger, who it was for. All these thoughts visited his head, and that was what scared him. With every step, John became closer to Tim. So many times he pretended that he would kill him, but did not end his life. Now would he be so merciful? The knife is already in John's hands. He definitely intends to be serious. He doesn't care that it's someone's son. He will resolve issues with him like an adult. John has already approached Tim. All he has to do is make one move, and the life of the impudent son of the ruler will end. Everything will become as meaningless for him as the lives of those people he dared to risk. Tim is already at his feet, trying to stop him with his screams, because he thinks that John will stoop so low that he will kill the defenseless. John still does not betray himself. He threw the knife on the floor to Tim so that he could solve everything himself before they mutated, while they could still be killed. Tim's face was covered with a shadow, the shadow of his conscience. It would be hard for him to kill his people with his own hands, but throwing them left and right is nothing for him. Otherwise, John will decide everything himself, and each of them will die tied up at the hands of the enemy, and they will die at the hands of the boss, who will give them a worthy death. Tim doesn't like John's decision. Even if he's guilty of everything, he won't be able to come to terms with killing his people. John continues to put pressure on him. He knows how to put pressure on a weak spot like no one else, even for someone as fearless as Tim. John remembered Tim how he tried to throw his little sister out to be eaten by zombies, back when the apocalypse had just begun in that very store, what now scares him. Tim is already in despair. He has no choice but to truly solve this problem in only one way. Only killing his subordinates will lead them to a dignified death, but to nothing good. John is very angry. He grabs Tim by the mouth and points out how he fed zombie meat to people, just for the sake of an experiment. He put so many lives at risk. John put a lot of pressure on him. He is ready to kill him. Now he asks if his hand is raised now, if he can kill his people who he put in danger. John didn't leave Tim to save him, not because he's so kind and generous. It's certainly not the kind of decisions that haunted his head. Tim is more scared than ever. He definitely could never feel such fear. He is in adulthood, which means he needs to solve issues like an adult. And this is exactly what John teaches him, taking off his rose-colored glasses. He throws Tim to the floor so that he will finally understand his place, so that he will finally understand what he has done and the fact that John left him alive, so that he will face his sins. John understood that all his sins would not come back to him. He just had to wait a little and everything would definitely come back like a boomerang. He abruptly rips the ropes off him, freeing him from his shackles, and now he can finish off everyone who is sick. John orders him to pick up the dagger, which in no case will please him. John shows all his superiority, all the superiority that Tim himself used to show over him when they were still students. After a while, now Tim is crawling at John's feet. Now John is telling him what he will do. The countdown has begun. He is already reaching for the knife and preparing himself and his fortune to end the lives of many people. Before it was easier to send a couple to be eaten by the dead, but now he does it all himself. The countdown is over, the last second of life for all patients, and now Tim will raise his hand to cut off the heads of his comrades. Tim begins to bare his teeth as if they are trying to cut off a limb, and he holds a piece of cloth in his mouth to ease his pain. He is already making the first swing of the knife, but now there is one end for everyone, an eternal guide along the river of souls, will prepare more places, since there will be quite a few deaths. John orders not to waste time, but he has already gotten up, and from his facial expression you can understand that he is dead inside, but he is obliged to kill them. John urges him to make such a difficult decision. His sixes ask for alms so that he does not kill, but it is too late. One of them is already very bad, and John continues to point out that either he or he will kill. The man's eyes are already covered with dew. He doesn't want to die or becomes a bloodthirsty monster, but he can't be saved. Tim is very unpleasant to admit this. The man's tears forced Tim's tears to break through the layer of pride. Now he understands the cost of his decisions. No one will help him, and his father is very far away. John never stops rushing him and never forgets to put pressure on him, but Tim orders him to shut up and be completely silent. So he became a dead man. But he didn't have long left. Now he's a dead man and there's nothing good about it. Tim continues to tell him to shut up over and over again, but his face shows no rage. John continues to humiliate him, even when he has already made up his mind, but John still wants to bring him to the point of absurdity. Tim still could not stand it. Screaming at the top of his voice, he pointed the knife at his ally with the intention of killing. The horror for Tim is over. They have already moved out, which means the death of that man has already happened, and everyone else moved on well-fed. John looks around. Michael has taken control of the bus. Tim is sitting in the farthest seat. Clearly the worst part of his life has begun for him, and it's his own fault. He looks at his hand, which was stained with blood, which was shaking with fear. For him, this day will be a real lesson in life, and John has become a real mentor for him. The elder looked at his hand and could not take his eyes off it. He could only look at it endlessly and was afraid to encounter this again. Clint, without putting in his 2 cents, does not remain himself. He called his comrade a dog and continued to mock him. He shows his power by mocking the son of the ruler himself. For Clint, Tim is a real coward who lacks the strength and fearlessness to kill the dead man he made. For him, everyone was disposable, but here he was afraid to kill his subordinate. The Six tries to intercede for Tim, thereby only aggravating the situation, as Tim again hides behind the backs of his allies. Clint confirms that he can only hide behind the backs of the Sixes. He remembers the death of Will, Tim's younger brother who protected him. Tim is hurt by every word addressed to him, and Will's death pierces his heart even more. Six is very angry, or rather he is furious. He is ready to blow Clint's head off so that he will no longer say unnecessary things. Suddenly Tim stops him, since he is already depressed, and he definitely doesn't need unnecessary conflicts. Six is in shock, but Tim has had enough that day, and he's definitely had enough. He doesn't even have a face. He's completely drooping. He doesn't even have the strength to fight. He was killed mentally, even if he himself was to blame. Six is confused, as he has never seen the boss in such a state. Clint's mockery can be heard from the outside, but there is no way to avoid this. Even if you cut off his hands or tie his tongue in a knot, he will continue to talk and mock. It's not for nothing that Tim sits behind everyone and across the aisle, all to make it more convenient for everyone to humiliate him, so that he's a real eyesore for everyone. Everyone hates Tim for what he did, but he understands that he won't be able to say a word, as he will only make things worse. They even remembered City B, thinking that on the same bus it was much better than in this ill-fated city. Clint, for some unknown reason, decided to stand up. What could be on his mind? John kept his eyes on the view from the window. He watches everything so that he is prepared for anything. Clint is delighted with John because he did not expect something like this from a dead man, such an ability to put pressure on people's weak points. Clint puts John in comparison with all people, and yet for him he becomes higher and higher than everyone at once. Clint rubs his chin and realizes that Tim is completely killed. The soul is already crawling out of him. He feels so bad, as if he will soon sell his 21 grams to the devil and find absolute emptiness. John believes that every person must pay his own price for the desire to live. If you want to live, you must pay, and often this is not money or treasure. He casts his suspicious glance at Clint, as if sensing some kind of immense self-interest in him. In response, he sincerely smiles at him. Some thoughts must have left his head for how long. Suddenly they stopped. What made them hit the brakes so suddenly? Michael is alarmed by something. Puzzlement is written on his face. He is excited. He does not understand what is in front of him. He presses the brake pedal hard to stop the bus as quickly as possible, as something mysterious met on their way. After a sharp braking, Clint almost took off, but John managed to grab him. Michael points out what made him stop moving so abruptly. A frightening van appeared on the road. Its nose was completely stained with blood. What could be there? These are the thoughts that come to all the bus passengers. Michael is very surprised by this. Even according to him, the van appeared there out of nowhere. John's gaze was intensely interested in what could be in this van and who its owner was. John ordered the others to sit on the bus while he went to investigate. John's feet are already stepping towards the van. With every step, he is getting closer to solving the mystery of this van. There is no surprise in John's gaze, which means he hasn't noticed anything wrong with this van yet. The van was not destroyed. There was no evidence of battle experience on it. But the blood on the bumper spoke of something completely different. Were its wheels crushing many dead people while the owner was driving away from them? Initially, John decided to inspect the interior. Perhaps it was there that the whole secret of the mysterious van in the middle of the forest was hidden. There is not a soul behind the wheel. No secrets have been revealed, but many more questions have arisen. Suddenly, someone rushed past the van, whether it was the owner, an enemy, or an ally. John instantly noticed him and fixed his gaze on him. He definitely needed to hurry up to catch up with him. The unknown person is trying to hide in the shadows of bushes and trees. He is also definitely not a zombie or a zombie, but he is the same as John, with intelligence. John looks at the stranger and listens to every rustle, and even managed to hear the ringing of the links of an iron chain. Our hero decides to immediately go to him and find out what kind of vans are standing in the middle of the road in a dense forest. John intends to catch him and even tells him to stop. How long will he run from him? The stranger does not have time to leave the horizon for John, yet he is not such a weakling. He is trying at full speed to catch up with the stranger in order to find out from him who he is, why he is running away, and what kind of van he is. The stranger is not a weakling, and is not going to yield to John in speed, which is very strange, since previously John could catch up with everyone, even a bus at full speed. John is hot on his heels, and his target's heels sparkle from his speed. Even John recognized his speed. He could never meet such a fast person. Who is he? Only one thing is clear, that he is definitely not a weakling. The speed of our stranger causes leaves to fall from the treetops directly onto him and John. It's incredible who he is. A monster, a man, or something in common. Why is he wrapped in bandages and running with such force? What are the chains on his neck? All these thoughts come to John. After laughing for a short time, he stopped abruptly. Does this mean that he is going to attack our hero? John was puzzled. You can see in his eyes that he really wants to ask him a lot of questions. He stopped for a break. He probably ran out of strength to run away from John, since John did not allow him to run even a meter. Will John really catch up with the fugitive? But not only this worries him, but he worries about the chains in which his hands are chained. John hopes that he has finally caught up with him, and no longer needs to chase him to reveal a couple of secrets. He jumped up as if on springs, heading towards him. He grabbed the tree branch tightly so that, like a monkey jumping on vines, he could quickly get to his prey. John quickly wants to get to know this guy better, who he is, if he is so fast that he is hiding that van. He examines a potential enemy in detail in order to counterattack him in a weak spot during an attack. The sudden stop of that stranger seemed very strange to John, because this is only done when preparing an insidious attack for the enemy. John attacks first and tells him to show his true face, which he hides under the hood. He pays attention to him. Finally, his face appears to the eyes that is hiding under the hood. It won't be possible to see the whole face because of the bandages, but the outlines will be known. At least it will be possible to find out what gender he is. His entire face is hidden behind a mask of bandages and hair. Only emerald eyes and malachite-colored hair are visible. John was shocked. Even after removing the hood, there were no fewer questions. His eyes were not just scared, but puzzled by who was hiding behind all this. Suddenly, the stranger dared to grab John's strong hand. He would not tolerate such impudence. His entire body is covered with bandages and chains. He is a prisoner or an unfortunate experiment, having such wounds. He has such powers. John couldn't expect such strength and grip from him. He couldn't move. The stranger found John interesting. Something about him captured him and inspired him. Still, our emerald is human, which can be said by the color of his skin, but his strength is shocking, since John has never lost to anyone before. He traps John in a lock, preventing him from moving. The stranger is so strong that he can easily move John himself, who is moving a bus on his shoulders. He is stronger than all the enemies John has previously encountered. He has never been able to meet such a force that could move him at such a speed. This is already the second opponent driving John into a tree, but the first time a giant zombie boar was chasing him at full speed. Now it's an ordinary person who pushed him into the tree without gaining speed. John has already put in all his strength, but still he cannot move from his spot since he is very strong. The stranger began to put pressure on him by saying that he himself recognized his strength, but was not going to concede even a little in strength. John had already begun to exert excess force to at least push his opponent aside. Unheard of impudence, he grabs John by the hair, but only let John free himself, and this impudent man will not live. But John still needs to free himself from the scoundrel's hands, but he can only stand pressed against the wall and clench his teeth. The stranger does not even forget to mock, yet he was not taught manners where he came from. He pressed him to the wall for a reason, but this is what crept into our stranger's skull. He decided to explore John to the fullest, even to sniff out everything that was hidden behind the pile of muscles. He needs to look at John fully, what exactly he wants to learn from him and his body. The insolent man's hand even got into John's mouth. Even his mouth did not remain untouched by the insolent man's hands. Looking at the teeth, the impudent man decided to try the fangs, which were razor sharp. The stranger considered John's teeth to be very healthy, which, in his opinion, was strange, like for a zombie. Finally, he took his playful fingers out of his mouth, which had already been lying in his mouth for quite a long time. John reacted instantly and clenched his teeth like a bear trap. The stranger was greatly surprised by his speed and even called him cruel to ridicule him. John is very angry with his opponent, and he is even more angry because he constantly puts his hands where they shouldn't. He thinks John is a weakling because he isn't that strong to him. Even if that's true, he shouldn't have said that about him. Suddenly, an arrow flies from the side, trying to pierce our heroes, who are pressed against the tree like a sweet couple. The stranger is no weakling and easily catches the arrow in mid-flight exactly as John did earlier, suggesting that his reaction is the same as John's, or even better. For our emerald, everything around seems interesting. Everything around awakens delight in it. John's entire team came running to save him, but it is unlikely that they will be able to help him in any way. Clint orders the stranger to let John go, holding him at crossbow point. The others are very worried since no one has ever been able to corner John, and some person took him hostage with such ease. The stranger is surprised that John has friends, and for him they are not even food or a snack, but comrades who will come to his aid. It seems to him that this is very bad, and that it will be very difficult with John, even for such a strong guy. He squeezed the arrow until his hands bled, and it occurred to him what his insidious plan was. He decided to kill John's friends and sent a bloody arrow in their direction, but it is unknown why he wet the arrow with blood. The arrow is already flying towards Clint. Any minute it will overtake him and send him to another world. He froze. The speed of the arrow amazed him. He did not have to use any devices to throw the arrow with such force and speed. John immediately freed himself from the enemy's grasp and rushed towards Clint to save him. Everyone nearby screamed his name, fearing that he would no longer be able to escape. He remained standing and watching all this, as if he had done all this just to see John's reaction, whether he would try to save his friend. Still, John manages to save Clint, grabs his head, and takes the entire blow upon himself. Clint can only say his name as the arrow pierces him and seems to be touching him with its tip. It really hurts him. Even the most severe zombie bites, the blows of a giant boar were a tickle for him, and now one arrow made him clench his teeth until he cracked. What would have happened to Clint if he had not been saved by John? The arrow would have pierced him through, and others would have suffered. Everyone is surprised by John's speed, since even here he managed to catch the arrow with his whole body, but saved Clint. The stranger silently watches how a dead man saves a man. For him, this is the most amazing experience of his life. Still, he considers John problematic, since he has a conscience or his friends turned out to be very important to him. A certain rumble from the side caught the attention of our impudent man, and he even turned his gaze towards the noise. The roar spread throughout the forest as if something more terrible was heading their way. It can't be that same van. It's from it that the rumble comes and is so strong that it spreads to the entire forest in a matter of seconds. The rumble still did not stop. Everything about that van was strange, and the fact that it had never been beaten, but there were many bloodstains on its white paint, filled with horror those who saw it on the horizon. Something was trying to get out of the van. Something was hitting the doors of the van, and blood was gushing out through them in different directions. This creature forced the stranger to leave them and go deal with him. The last phrase aggravated the situation. He said that they would definitely meet, since they still had an eternity ahead of them, and now he had to go. Clint is still scared, and John is trying to get up from his knees and continue interrogating our stranger. The enemy whistles at someone as if calling his puppy or his ally, whom John and the whole team would definitely not be able to defeat. It got out and right next to the bus with passengers. What is it that follows the whistle of our impudent person? What a pile of blood, flesh, and rot. From inside the van, heaps of stains of bloody hands are visible, as if this van is a Pandora's box, in which there was something very terrifying. The giant creature crawled towards our heroes and left a bloody trail behind it. A stranger is waiting for his dog, a rather strange pet, but they are similar to each other, two oddities in the middle of the forest. The monster is as fast as its owner. It covered this entire distance in a couple of seconds. He is very dangerous. It is rare to see such a strong enemy in the middle of the forest, who also has such a strong pet. He points out that John may still enjoy his life, but he will definitely return later. He glances their way, making sure that their connection is sincere. They and the creature leave and leave them completely alone. John's blood dripped from the wound that the wanderer left him. That arrow seriously wounded him. John easily pulled the arrows out of his back, which was bleeding heavily even under John's strong regeneration. Everyone was very scared when John was pierced by that arrow, and even thought that he would never pull it out again. John gets up with heaviness after such a battle, yet the strength of the new enemy is too great for the current John. Clint worries about John the most, since it was his fault that he got hit. It's hard for John to even breathe. This is the strength of the enemy he will meet in the near future. He's still okay. He's all beat up and badly injured, but he gives everyone hope that he's okay. John even now assesses the situation sensibly and remembers the people and the bus, since it was from there that terrible creature came running. John hurries towards the bus as if he absolutely does not care about that arrow wound. Clint will not forget about this, and will remind John that he should take a break and treat the wound. Suddenly, someone stops Clint, grabbing his hand, realizing that it's better not to stop John now. He paid attention to the one who stopped him and was surprised by the reaction, since it turned out to be his beloved, who should care for him most of all. Something told Alice that she shouldn't stop John now and let him go in their direction. John is furious. His wound is bleeding, but something haunts him. What is the catch in that attack? Why did that guy wet the arrowhead with his blood? What brought him discomfort was the wound, which was so serious that it was through, and the wind could blow through it. Finally, they returned. Everything was fine. Everyone was alive, and the bus was not damaged, since everything could be expected from such a pet and its owner. The passengers are rejoicing. They have returned, and everyone is happy about it. Well, not without reason, since without them, they will not survive even a week in this harsh world. John glanced to the side as if something very important had prompted such attention in him. Still, this is something much more important than a squirrel running past, which is what aroused such attention from John. As a result, everyone was in shock, something incredibly dangerous or a new enemy. They were just getting out of the thicket of the forest and out onto the road along which they were driving and ran into a strange van. Here it is. They were frightened by a giant trail of blood that came from the same van that was smeared with the blood of that creature. The footprints were similar to human handprints, and the campaign recognized that they were truly similar to human footprints. Leo stops them and asks them not to touch the trail of that creature for now. The doctor orders everyone to get on the bus so that everyone is on it at the same second. From the moment the Wanderer called that creature, everyone who had once eaten zombie meat began to behave strangely. Everyone showed some symptoms. The boy they cured was sobbing and screaming at the top of his voice in pain. What could happen to them? What was the strength of that Wanderer? The veins in the boy's neck bulged greatly, and his mother tried to calm him down, but she didn't understand a damn thing what was happening to him. John immediately tries to find out the reason and whether the boy will become a zombie. Leo points out that there is no way that boy will become a zombie. This is just a temporary symptom. Everyone who ate zombie meat had the same symptoms as my son. The situation is utter horror, and they, like no one else, understand this better than anyone else. And that van that from the inside is full of blood and all the most terrible things. John remembered that some kind of creature got out of that strange car, what it was and what it looked like. Such questions appeared in his head. Leo is confused. That creature has disappeared from sight, but he believes that that creature could not be human. Someone nevertheless shouted out and opinions were divided. He said that the monster was a man. John and Leo instantly glance in his direction. Our Tim turned out to be the screamer. He, grabbing his stomach with his hand, indicates that something was a person. Tim did not consider him not a monster or a mutant, but still he was scared to the point of trembling all over his skin, and this is typical since the creature like a shadow is gloomy and like a terrible nightmare. His eyes narrowed to Quanta. To see his pupils, you need to look at them under a multi-million-dollar magnification. That creature also had a terrible smell, which blocked the nose with barricades and killed from the inside. Clint is not even going to mock Tim after he almost let a stream flow under him. John has received the necessary information and goes to investigate the van, and Leo says that Tim's fear is inherent and they could suffer the same fate. Clint followed John, asking if he had found anything that might reveal a secret or two. John examined the van in detail from the inside and apparently noticed something. Contrary to Leo's orders, John still touched the substance, which was a mixture of rot, flesh, and blood in general, everything that was deposited from that creature. John understood that that creature was decomposing and bleeding, but how could it be human and not die with such problems? Everything contradicted each other. It decomposed, bled, but did not have human strength and speed. This gave Clint good food for thought, which makes him think well about how to defeat that creature and that Wanderer. Clint could not even think that, except for John, there were no people left in the world who survived a zombie bite. Blood flowed from the van in streams, and the darkness inside made it clear in what conditions the creature was kept. Clint realizes that the situation has worsened, and points out that John himself understands this. John's gaze was blank. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, he was not given an easy choice. Clint persistently explains the power of that Wanderer, who pinned him in a corner and sniffed him out, reaching into his mouth with his hands, as if he had seen a strange animal. John opened his mouth wide and began to understand what Clint was trying to understand. Suddenly, someone grabs him by the shoulder to call him or draw attention to himself. It turned out to be Leo, who pointed out that the boy was getting worse and worse, and he urgently needed help. His eyes became empty. He begged for help, and Leo asked to get some meat for him. Still, Leo comes with bad news. The symptoms are getting worse, and even those people on the bus may not last even a few days. That's all. Clint decided to start that conversation that he had been keeping inside himself for a very long time, holding these thoughts inside himself for a long time, keeping a conversation that John definitely wouldn't like in any form. Clint points out the harsh reality that he cannot be sure that he will live to see tomorrow, and even those creatures they met today may come again. The Wanderer and his pet are like two shadows that leave the thicket of the forest, like the guardians of the forest from whom they must obtain permission to continue their journey. Clint is hesitant. He tells the merciful John that he cannot carry so much responsibility on his hump. He cannot solve the problems of all those useless people. Leo tries to shut Clint up, even raises his voice at him, since you can't take responsibility for people and abandon them at the most difficult moment. Clint orders Leo to shut up now. Clint has long since taken off his rose-colored glasses, but has not stopped being a child who will throw away an unnecessary toy when it is no longer needed, like a disabled person throwing off his crutches after treatment. Clint grabs John by the collar and remembers Alice and Meg, who also need to be saved, and how he needs to keep track of everyone. Nothing could be more important than their lives. Then why don't they leave those people to their fate? These are the thoughts that have been in Clint's head for a long time. The child's mother ran out of the bus with tears in her eyes and asked them not to abandon them, since she herself understood her hopelessness. It was in vain that she intervened between the conversation between the furious Clint and John. She could definitely get into trouble, since Clint, in a rage, does whatever he wants. She nevertheless approached them. They turned their attention to her, and soon she would drive Clint to the point of absurdity. She walked up to John, grabbed his hands, and begged him not to leave them. She grabbed his arms tightly, letting him know that her requests were sincere. She laid her head on his chest and continued begging, but John couldn't even say a word. He had a very difficult choice, as if the captain's place was occupied by two people, Clint and John, only Clint had already decided everything. She understands that they cannot watch their loved ones turn into dead people. John is immediately reminded of this situation, a moment from memory when his parents became dead, and every time these images pop up in his memory and lead him into darkness. Here it is, a grimace of fear on the fearless and valiant John, who cannot move his tongue after such an influx of problems. Incredibly, now Clint is definitely furious. He is ready to tear and throw. He grabs his mother by the hair, and she is unlucky to fall under Clint's hot hand. He throws her to the floor, absolute rage. Even after getting his hand shot, he wasn't this angry. The boy was already becoming a zombie, and his mother was thrown to the floor in front of her eyes with such force. Clint grabs her by the collar and makes her understand why they want to leave them. They are weak and useless. That's what an angry Clint, who is full of rage, thinks. He points out that they can only cry from no help and no gratitude. Clint's words scared even Alice and Meg. It was difficult for them to hear this, but it was much more difficult for the other passengers, since they were the ones who were going to be abandoned. Everyone began to leave the bus. All the passengers understood where this was all going and saw no point in being a burden for them. All the patients heard Clint well. Everyone began to leave their seats. The bus became lighter and lighter, and this was precisely the load that was beyond Clint's strength. Alice agreed with Clint, since even she, without a leg, protects John's sister and manages to give him joy. Clint had already pulled out a dagger and was ready to chop up that impudent mother who dared to go where she shouldn't have. Clint puts a lot of pressure on them, even if he's partially right, but he shouldn't get away with such craziness. Clint is cruel to those who do nothing. Everyone is equal to him. Be she a mother with small children, be a wise old woman, he will not take them into account and put a knife to their neck. John is silent. Something in his character doesn't add up. He would never allow Clint to do whatever comes into his head. Clint was determined to send every single burden out the door so that they would never cause trouble again. Mother begs for help. Wrinkles appear on her face from fear and pain. Still, one of the passengers decided to show his character and hit Clint very, very hard so that he would stop doing all this. Michael tries to catch the falling Clint, and his offender brazenly stands and watches as his enemy, and once his boss, falls from his blow from behind. They are real impudent people. Without doing anything, they demand more than anyone else, as if important persons to whom everything is offered on a saucer also dare to beat their protector. The man decided to mention a certain rescue once upon a time when Clint saved them. Clint is also wrong in giving complete protection. He himself taught them not to do anything, when he himself solved all their problems and allowed them to sit under his wing. The beginning of the apocalypse, the dead literally walked under the eyes of the doors and looked for their future victims behind every door. That man at that time was very frightened, trembling, and the sweat dripping from his face confirmed all this, as if he was a rooster whose head would be cut off any minute. It seems like the dead have no mind, but they were able to find out about the people in the apartment, even behind the door. Everyone was paralyzed with fear. Small lightning passed through the nerve endings, adrenaline played at full strength, and the body froze. As if shrouded in chains, the body could not take a single step. The man grabbed a knife from the closet. How will it help him against the crowd of zombies? Just not to give in to them too easily. He was very weak in spirit, literally, not yet fighting back. He decides to commit suicide. but his wife stops him in time. The dead were already on their heels and peeking out between the cracks of the doors, showing with all their appearance that they wanted to devour everyone here. Suddenly, a dark silhouette appears behind you, be it the shadow that saved all those people from inevitable death within 4 walls. The corpse of a dead man falls face down into his own pool of blood. They are saved. This man spoke about this salvation. People still can't believe that they were rescued, and it turns out that they even tried to find them. Clint pointed out to his people that there would be people in this house, and he turned out to be right. Clint didn't expect there to be so many people here, so he was very happy. He brought the pipe to that man and pointed it at him, which made him very scared. It was then that Clint said that they could follow him. Then there was not a drop of self-interest in his words, but now he drives them away without even giving them a chance to show themselves. Clint made a promise to them that they could be under his protection, and now people point out to him that it was his fault that he saved them. Clint was enraged by such impudence. He could not believe that such a useless burden began to contradict him and talk about justice. "Everything is obvious." Clint slowly said the man's name, which means that something big is planned, lest the man lose his life after such words. Clint says that he is too good, but he sees such insolent people first, who blame their breadwinner without doing anything for him. His veins bulged with anger, his fangs sharpened, and his gaze became frightening. He was ready to send every rebel to the next world so as not to meet with them. Clint is not involved in charity work. You want a roof over your head and food on your plate. Be prepared to give at least some benefit to the boss. He throws this insolent one and points to his place, from which moment Clint began to have the responsibility to cater to their every whim. The following impudent people are not far from the man. Everyone wants their share, and they are ready to kill Clint, considering him their equal. They pulled out their knives and quickly rushed towards Clint. Michael and Sam take the brunt of it, and overall the entire fight rests on their shoulders. Sam has already been grabbed by the face. The battle is both ridiculous and serious. Michael is surrounded on all sides. The battle is quite tense for both of them, especially when the fight is not equal. They were not weaklings and even showed themselves well, since even Sam had probably already lost a couple of teeth. Sam flies off to the onlookers after taking a strong blow to himself, but everyone around is surprised at the fight in which both sides are in the wrong. Meg is very frightened and holds on tightly to Alice. Everyone could not expect such a brawl in the middle of the day. The mother of a sick baby asks that they not fight. She is afraid of the consequences. She dares to beg for help, but is afraid of fights. In her place, she should hide in a secluded place and not stick her head out for a while. Suddenly, her doll-like gaze turned her attention to something else. She does not lose hope that John will help her and calls him again and again, asking for help. She addresses him without saying his name, as if she never cared what his name was, even after what he did. Still, Clint will not leave her alone. She will always get what she deserves for every impudence she has. That sparkle instantly disappeared from her eyes. All her hope disappeared the second Clint grabbed her hand. Whether everything was lost for her, it all depended on his mercy. From Clint's face, one can understand that nothing good is in store for her, only more pain, fear, and horror. Clint explains to John that these people don't give a damn about him when they don't need him, and when they do need him, they will always ask for help. He believes that they do not value anything that is given to them on a plate. All they need is constant protection and food right on their plate. Clint tries to reach out to John, but in response, he receives unanswered silence. Something is definitely wrong with John. The words of that mother were too painful for him. He continued to remain silent, as if the whole outside world did not matter to him. Perhaps the attack of that wanderer, the arrow, the tip of which was smeared with his blood, was to blame for this state. Clint endlessly explains about the personalities and character of those people who beat Michael and Sam at that very second, explains to him that for all of them, he will always be a monster whom they will honor as a god and pray as needed. There was anxiety in John's eyes. What happened to him was known only to him. The wanderer's blood began to act and metastasized. There was an uncharacteristic trembling in him. The spread of the poison had begun, yet John's behavior had already told everything long ago. Clint is worried. He just now noticed the oddities in John's character and began to ask him what happened to him. Blood gushed from the wound. Clint's eyes showed all his fear. They had the same fear as 15 years ago one night. John was spitting blood. Clint was trying to catch him and somehow help with his condition. John's fall could no longer be stopped. The poison was very strong. That wanderer was very dangerous. Even his blood brought many problems and even incapacitated John. What kind of power is hidden in that stranger that could send John to a hospital bed with his incredible regeneration? Clint is shocked. He could previously understand the strangeness in John's behavior, but he reacted too late and may have lost his friend. Our hero collapsed to the ground. He had no face before, but now his powerlessness and malaise are even worse than before. It's all due to the blood of the wanderer. What are his goals? John lost consciousness and was bleeding. It was very strange for him to lie in such a state. No one could bring him to this. Mother immediately reacts to everything with screams and screams. She is more afraid for herself than for our character, since without him, Clint will abandon them, which means that they will all die. Alice is sincerely scared for John. What's wrong with him? Whether the wanderer is guilty of this? These are the questions that come to her mind. Finally, everyone stopped fighting and looked towards John. Oddly enough, they were scared. But who was scared for John, and who was scared for themselves? It is clear that only Clint's team is afraid of losing John as a friend. John did not want to wake up. Nothing was written on his face, but only he knows what pain he is experiencing now. Clint was trembling with fear. His hands were shaking. He did not understand why this happened to him so suddenly. He lay at his knees like a lifeless corpse, did not react to anything, did not respond to the call, and did not show any signs of life at all. Clint, afraid of doing something unnecessary, lightly touched his face, as if he were a museum exhibit or an archaeologist with a new fossil. You could tell from Clint's face that he was worried. He didn't understand what had happened in such a short period of time. After a while, the situation became calmer. Countless fights ended, and all attention turned to John. Alice was tearing out pieces of gauze with her gentle hands to bandage John. They had already tied him up tightly, put a bedding under him. Everything was sterile and safe. John was well taken care of, but it was too late. Clint scolds Leo for negligence, since he did not notice the injury, although the doctor. Clint completely scolded Leo, but Leo refused his words since he was always there and was in the dark himself. Leo accurately indicated that he is a specialist in treating people. He certainly has not encountered treating the dead. Everyone was severely beaten and seemed to be placed side by side in a corner, but the man decided, without asking, silently to leave in an unknown direction. Clint reacted to him immediately, and his intentions were only to go to the restroom to relieve himself. He immediately screamed and ordered to sit still and endure, while he mumbled something like an apology. Clint was very angry with them, and even no need bothered him. Our boy instantly calmed down since he cannot scream in front of John so as not to worsen his condition. Everyone gathered around John and monitored his condition in detail, but now they won't miss anything. Clint put his hand to his forehead and realized his temperature had risen. Clint finally understood the reason for John's condition. It was all the fault of the wanderer who smeared the arrowhead with his poison blood. Nevertheless, the fears were confirmed. The stranger squeezed the arrow until it bled, wounded himself in order to finish off his enemy. John saved Clint at the cost of his safety. Only the speed of the arrow would have been enough to kill Clint. But the wanderer was serious and decided to kill him without mercy. Clint's hand was shaking. He was afraid that he and his carelessness were to blame for everything. It was he who was attacked, and it was him who John saved, covering him with his body. He felt guilty. There was sadness on his face about what he would have to do to atone for his guilt. John's sudden cough pulled everyone out of the abyss of despair, and he finally woke up. Clint immediately started bombarding him with questions about whether he was alive, how his condition was, and whether he had woken up. John opened his eyes. He is still alive. He is not such a weakling that someone's blood would kill him. Everyone rejoiced, shouted his name. A bright smile appeared on their faces. The world was filled with new happiness. For John, it is a joy to wake up and see familiar faces in front of him. His smile begins to shine better than any star in the sky. But still, this does not make his condition better. He needs to ask for help just to get up. But still, no one will refuse him here. John's gaze became clearer. He stopped being so empty and drooping, and finally you can expect an answer from him. He touched his face and wondered why his face was so dirty, as if he were with his little son who had gotten dirty in the sandbox. John's behavior was just as strange. For some reason, he cared so much about Clint. John noticed the parasite passenger sitting nearby, whom Clint had left alone while the hero was in oblivion. Clint did not like the way John behaved. In his behavior, he saw excessive concern, as if he was not of a traditional orientation. John couldn't stop praising him for working so hard to keep things in order. Clint began to become cocky in response to John's affections, since, in his opinion, he was vile. He explains everything by saying that he was obliged to do so. If everything had been different, Clint threw overboard all the unnecessary ones. John remained silent. He beat every rebel, every single one of them got what they deserved, everyone got a couple of bruises and bruises. Clint pointed out that John would never get the chance to save him again and appear so holy. Clint even judged him for caring about everyone but always forgetting about himself. John began his speech again, which should touch Clint to the core. He explains to him that even if he returned to the past, he would save him again. Even knowing that the arrow was poisoned and could kill him, he would expose his back to the blow. Clint stopped. John's words pierced him much deeper than that ill-fated arrow, and it remained deep in his heart. For Clint, this John's arrow was not in the back, but in the heart, and he took it into himself, be it medicine. He was captivated by these praises. He could not even finish the sentence as John bombarded him with compliments. John gets up and explains that Clint doesn't owe him anything because he's not just comrades, but friends. Clint protected John's little sister as well as Alice. This is what elevates him above everyone. This is why John considers Clint a true friend. Even when that wanderer attacked him, Clint did not leave his friend in danger. He went into battle with a stronger enemy and threatened him with an ordinary crossbow. Then Clint was the only one who came forward to help John. Clint was touched by John's words. Joy was visible in his eyes that he was praising him so much, praising his virtues. John sits up and lets Clint finally understand that all his good deeds mean that they both don't owe each other anything. John considers such signs of relationships to be characteristics of sincere friendship. Clint froze in one place. John's words struck him so much that he was petrified at that very second, as if he had been standing in the bitter cold for a very, very long time. Clint's mouth opened very wide. He did not understand how to react to such praise, since he had probably never heard such words from anyone. Here is Clint's real smile, full of joy and happiness. He finally heard what he so wanted to hear. He was very embarrassed, but continued to pretend that John's words sounded vile and disgusting. He did not stop praising him, but others reacted to this with their contemptuous silence. Alice was the most unhappy about this reunion. There was no joy in her face, only obvious disgust. What use was a blood-stained t-shirt for them, that their hands were shaking just from the mere sight of it? Clint's entire team couldn't even put on bloody clothes, but why did they need them? Sam wonders what is special about this clothing, why it was smeared with blood from the van. Clint listened to John again and ordered them to do as he told them, because if he said so, then it was certainly true. One of them decided to express his dissatisfaction and explained that under no circumstances could he even throw it on himself. John coolly pointed out that if they did